listening in. I know we've got a lot of important stuff going on, but I also know we're sort of in transition, you know, with sort of organizational meetings and appointees and people like that. So if it's okay with the committee, I was gonna sort of dispense with minutes and any formal actions, and sort of move into the main agenda item, which sort of followed up on the last conversation we had, which really started a great brainstorming session about new member orientation. So unless I hear anything different, we'll sort of dispense with items 1, 2, and 3, and really just move into commissioner training, if that's all right with everybody. All right, that's what we're gonna do. So I think what I'm gonna do is turn over staff and have you lead the conversation. Thank you.
That's great. Yeah, thank you. So 2 things that we wanted to be able to talk about today. One is to follow up on the actual content delivery for February 8th. And so I wanted to put that as a second item though, because I wanted to give Janice a chance to share with you what she's been working on with Sid in designing a SharePoint site that would be available to all commissioners going forward where, well, I'll let you talk it through, but the idea is to sort of move our organizational resources, what might have historically been handed out in a print form, a hard copy. Well, we can certainly produce it in that way, but we will be able to create a digital workspace for all board members to be able to access the information at, you know, their leisure. I know, Mr. Waddell, that's something when you first joined probably was something you were looking for, and it was kind of more just a flood of emails and links and things like that instead of a dedicated site. So Janice, do you want to take over?
Sure. Sid, can you share the SharePoint site? I have am having some IT issues this week and can't actually access SharePoint, but so that is our new, what we're calling our board and committee page. It's a new SharePoint site, and our intention is to give access to it to all of our various board and committee members, the PlanRVA Commission, CBTA, and TPO Policy Board, all of their committees. This we're calling the landing page, which just sort of welcomes everybody. And then as you go down, I'm trying to do it myself, forgetting that it's yours. As you go down, we have 3 boxes there for the 3 organizations. And so new and current commissioners can go there to get any information that, the information is all on our website, but we wanted it all also in one central location along with new member orientation files. So Sid, if you click on the PlanRVA site, when you open up this page, we will have sort of a 1-page description there of what the PDC is, maybe brief history. It actually may be more than 1 page, but we're working on those. The second box there would be an orientation, probably a PowerPoint. The third box, we've just sort of earmarked that with acronyms. We have so many of those. That's one of the documents that we're sharing. That may change if eventually we have some sort of introductory video, something like that. It would probably rest in that place rather than acronyms. And then if you look to the right of that, we have links to our website, our YouTube page, blog and newsletter. And under that are all the documents that everyone will need. So it will be the bylaws, the charter, any policy and procedure documents, committee descriptions, committee membership lists, directions to our office, a meeting schedule, the member organization links. Sid, can you open that one? And I'm not sure if we have that document in there yet, but we don't. That's okay. That is just a document with each of the 9 locality emblems that's linked to that locality's website. Organizational charts, and the other thing that we would like to add here would be contacts, so that any commissioner can access phone, email information for any other commissioner and committee members.
I don't have a problem with that, but I use my personal cell phone, and I don't have a problem giving it out, but I'm not sure everybody wants their personal cell phone.
Right, we have we were actually developing what are we calling it, Martha? A commissioner profile form?
Yeah.
For everyone to fill out. And on that form, there's a place to indicate if you have any contact information that you do not wish shared, such as home addresses, things like that. And we'll evaluate that as we go forward and see. We have options to restrict access to that information And we'll be shoring that up.
Because we're not
Worst
gonna
comes
need
to
a
worst, we just
specific
won't.
log on for this, right? This will be open to anybody that goes to this page and looks at it.
Well,
That's the intention right now, yeah.
But I believe that we are only,
I think the idea is that
Giving
we'll share the
link
link with
Yeah, but
members,
once
but I mean,
it's
it's,
out there, if
yes.
somebody
could.
finds it, it's
Right.
out there.
Right.
with the exception of the contact information, if any of that information is more than what we have on our website, if we share, that, and again, we haven't got to that point yet, but this is all public information. All the other information is already on our website, bylaws, things like that. The only thing that we need to be careful about are those contact numbers, and we're gonna, like I said, make sure we find out if there's any information that anyone doesn't want shared, and we won't. So that's where we are right now. That's the, that Sid brought up the CBTA one now, and he was able to add a video into that one because we had one existing. So that's
Actually,
sort of
you
how
put-
that one will go.
I added the documents now to the TPO page and the CBTA, but if you click what is CBTA, right now it takes you to this PDF.
Okay,
So you can go and look at all of that, and then the same thing with the TPO page. You click what is the RTPO, it takes you to this. So right now there's documents attached, but the goal is to make that streamlined a lot easier for the board
Okay.
members to.
so that we will have a document like that for the PlanRVA Commission as well. But the idea is for members of the CBTA to be able to access their own orientation and other information, but also they may wanna look at the PlanRVA bylaws. They may wanna look at your meeting schedule. So it will be open to all board and committee members, and you just select which of the 3 organizations you wanna enter into that page and see the information.
So Janice, this looks good, and this is what we were talking about, or what I understood when we were talking about kind of putting it together in SharePoint. The one question I have, as somebody who is relatively new and participates in one of these 3, is where we address sort of how do they relate, or what,
Yes.
why are these 3 together? And I don't know if that would be in the orientation of each or in the overview, but it might be helpful for people who are on CBTA and don't really know what we do over here
Absolutely.
to get some easy perspective without having to go take orientation training to.
So I
to get
think
it.
this year, we're sort of debuting the tool and going through the normal content. In future years, when this is just a tool, this will be frankly less of maybe a big deal, because it'll just be
something that's
what's
there,
available.
yeah.
But yeah, what we're doing is working on kind of a master orientation presentation that's geared toward the PlanRVA commissioner. So that talks about this organization and its relationship to the support role that we play with the CBTA, the RRTPO, the Emergency Management Alliance, et cetera. And then as we go into the orientation specifically for someone who maybe doesn't sit on PlanRVA but is on, say, CBTA or the TPO, we will still have a set of slides that include that relationship description, and then go into the substance of what it is to be on, say, the TPO or the authority. So we're building that into the content of the orientation slide deck, and then that'll be saved on the SharePoint site for kind of later referral as needed.
And then that makes sense. And
Okay.
my other question, I guess, is sort of relates to kind of how open this is versus the webpage and other places. Are there things that are gonna be in both, or is the idea that like the traditionally public-facing minutes and agendas and things will be in one place, and you see where I'm going?
The intention right now, but again, we're just building this, so we're open to changing it however, would work best for everyone. The intention was to have basically everything that we include in an orientation PDF now, or a printed packet that we would give out. So bylaws, policies, committee descriptions, things like that, and not have any of the minutes, agendas, things like that. Those will still live on the main PlanRVA website, as do a lot of these other documents. You can find the bylaws and the charter there. We just wanted to bring everything that we consider orientation related here, to give commissioners, like a
You
one-stop.
can put a link here, so if they're here, that they can see a link to go to the minutes or to other things. You
Yes.
Just have a link on this that they don't have to maneuver to websites.
That's a good idea. We have a link to the PlanRVA website, but we can specify a link to
You
the
could have a
commission
link
minutes
for each of the
page.
things that people might be interested in, and takes them directly to that
Takes them
in
to
the
the place
website
it is,
instead
yeah.
of, and then it's a quick.
Well, and just as time goes on and this builds out and more information shared, keeping an eye on sort of the purpose of organizing this as a more inward set of documents intended for commissioners to
But apparently
understand,
not
get up to
restricted
speed.
access. We're not
But it's, yeah, but it's still public, but we're really kind of trying to get, I think, trying to get the public to kind of go to the other sources, right?
Right.
And so just sort of keeping that in mind as we go.
I think you're hitting the nail on the head. It's like the website serves a purpose right now for the public and our members. And that will still be the case for downloading packets and meeting materials and things like that. But I think that the purpose of the SharePoint set is to be able to create more of a one-stop shop for the organizational resources that you as members of this body or any of the three bodies need to do your jobs. Where right now, if you were on the website, you'd be clicking kind of all over the place
Yeah,
because
that's
of
what
how
I'm
it's
saying, just put a
organized.
button that says,
Yeah.
meeting agenda packet, or the next meeting, and
Yeah.
then like a link to previous ones somewhere.
Mhm.
And then this is a quicker way to
Yeah.
get there if you're.
So I'm thinking ABC commissioner will likely maybe bookmark this as opposed to like having to click through a bunch of things on the website. And then you'll still interact with the website technically, but it'll be because you clicked the
On
meetings
SharePoint.
budget, on SharePoint. And so we just think that it's gonna be more organized in a way that's more user-friendly to you all as commissioners. Or your locality staff, that kind of a thing. And that's partially why we're not doing the restricted access either. But also from as you all know, sort of from the laws around public communication haven't really caught up to digital workspaces and things like that. So we're just being kind of cautious that we're not creating a way for members of the public body to communicate digitally without being in the public domain.
So is this a best practice kind of thing?
I think
Or are we
we're
paving
creating it.
Yeah, I thought
Yeah.
so too.
Yeah.
Because I was gonna ask the same thing, is there any preference to have it restricted access? But then probably that does get overridden by regulations, right?
Yeah, and I've talked to a couple of other organizations about sort of how they approach this, and I think everybody's finding their way on making information more digital. A lot of the feedback we get is that maybe at the moment that you onboard, getting handed a big binder is helpful, but then most people don't really actually want it because it just is something that sits on a shelf, or you've got to find a shelf to put it on, that kind of
Well,
thing.
doing it this way too, if you have a specific item you're looking for, you can search it.
Yeah,
And in your binder, the only way to search it is to flip pages or try to look at a table of contents and hope that it helps you get there. But now if you got keywords,
yeah.
digitally, you can find it.
And earlier this year, I should have mentioned in the
It's
intro, Janice researched, 3 or 4 different board management, tools that are out there. And it seemed like for what we were striving to accomplish, at least in this stage, using the SharePoint as opposed to a subscription-based service or something like that was obviously affordable, but it was also felt like it was the right kind of speed and scale for us right now. But we've been monitoring kind of like the best practices, not just in our type of organization, but in just general kind of like board management and that kind of thing. And it feels like this isn't precisely what the playbook calls for, but it feels like it fits kind of our unique setup.
And then the other question I always ask when it comes to technology is, are most members using laptops or phones? Because there's a different application for phones. I try to not do a whole bunch of searching on that, but I might be unique. So I always.
Well, you
I
can
just go-
set your platform up to be both laptop and phone friendly, and
You
I
do.
would say that you need to
I-
find a way to do
I
both,
would agree.
because
Yeah,
everybody's gonna communicate slightly differently.
I see your question, Mr. Wada. Mr. Gaten. So 2 things about that. I think we will look into the web-based, making it phone accessible, like mobile friendly. I doubt that many people want to do this, but SharePoint does have an app that you can download on different devices. So if that's the preference for people too, then of course that automatically adapts it over, but that may or may not be what people want to do. So we'll look into the mobile-friendly version of the SharePoint
I
website.
prefer to use a laptop, but if I'm in a pinch and I'm out on the road and I need to look something up,
Yeah,
I wanna be able to do it through my phone. I don't wanna do it that way all the time, but I wanna be able to.
that makes sense.
Yep, it's gotta be thought about in advance.
Andres probably only uses his phone while he's riding his bicycle.
Riding the bus,
On the bus.
not driving the bus, just riding the bus.
I saw Mr. Weddell asked a question in the chat about would we have a dry run before the event? I think that that's a good question, and one thing we could do is, once we have more of the content on here, if it would be okay, we could share the access link out to the committee members to just sort of click around, and we could create some kind of a, you know, sort of a, I don't know, a little overview to orient folks before we do the full release in February.
Okay. Well, I mean, think about that, because I mean, the event is what we're really leading up to, right? On the 8th, and this is like a precursor to it. So it's a homework assignment's gotta be done by the 8th.
Right.
So if we can provide value by agreeing to sort of test it and break it
Yeah.
and stuff like that before the 8th.
That'd be great.
Okay.
Yeah, and also I think, I mean, the nice part about this is that it's a living space, so if there are documents or if there's information that you'd like to see, or you like the boxes retitled or reorganized, I mean, all of those things can be edited.
All right.
I won't say easily, but I think the way Sid's been talking, it's, you've kind of gotten a good handle
It
on.
seemed pretty alright to kind of maneuver around this right
Yeah.
now and creating stuff, and I've also browsed some online sample designs on how to streamline a little bit better and what pops out more and things like that. So over time, with exactly what you mentioned about doing a dry run, getting a form or some sort of categories of movement, clickability, things like that, that the board members can answer and provide comments on, I think that will help me understand how to make this page that way or make changes and things like that, and then looking into the point of mobile and laptop friendly option, and if that design changes so that it looks more friendly on the mobile as well too, so.
And we have still quite a number of documents to add to the site. This is just a rough draft. We wanted to get some initial feedback today. But I'm thinking we could probably have it ready enough to send out for you all to go through and test and offer feedback maybe by next Wednesday. And then that would, if they had it for 2 weeks and could get us the feedback by January 31st, then that gives us a week to make any changes based on that before the actual orientation.
Sounds good, okay.
So I will make a note to make sure we get this out to committee members by the 17th. If I can
Quick questions, Chairman.
Go ahead, Mr. Waddell.
Will the, first off, my initial reaction, beautiful presentation, beautiful work. It seems to be, to quote Martha, one-stop shopping, which is real convenient and probably will facilitate people getting more than they thought they were looking for initially. Will the slides that will be on this website be downloaded?
Yeah, I think all of the documents that are there, that were there on that right-hand side in the document library will be things that anybody could print or download and save to their device. So, yeah, so if you want to
So right now,
like any of those things, you could open, or you can download, print, save to your computer, that kind of thing.
Nice, thank you.
Sure.
Any other comments on that? We'll move into really the content of the event, right?
Yeah,
So
wait,
for me,
sorry,
this-
just one other quick thing, going back a little bit to the, how it's laid out in public access. Something for you guys to consider would be on each of the org pages up where it says PlanRVA above the box, to maybe just have a little tag about, you know, a resource for commissioners to just a little bit of context setting. So if somebody lands here and that this isn't what they're looking for, or somehow gets linked here, it's just kind of positioned as, this isn't the generic public one, this is the internal one. And that just may help a little bit, both for commissioners and the public
Yeah, you're in the right
about, like,
space.
you know what you're looking at.
Yeah, that makes a lot of
It
sense.
does too.
But I really like, overall, I love how we're kind of getting this set up. It's exactly the sort of vision we talked about, so it's good
Yeah,
work, good work.
facilitates more communication throughout, even between meetings too. So,
I think the other thing that this does, hopefully, is reinforce some of the messaging that you all gave to us in the last discussion, that I felt like I heard loud and clear, that you don't really want the orientation to be this dry review of all of our organizational and history documents. But really, what I heard in the last conversation, which I was hoping that we could do a little bit of discussion today about, is coming from this perspective of, okay, so we are going to have a larger than have been in the past number of people who are new to this organization and are coming in and probably wondering, what in the world is there in this for me or my locality or my district or that kind of thing. So really kind of starting there and then moving into what the benefits or what the possibilities are of being a part of a regional table. And then kind of the third thing, the lower on the priority level from an order, is to go into kind of like the operational organizational functions of the organization. Historically, our orientation have always been heavy on the first set, that third set of things that, probably aren't necessarily that attention grabbing.
So let me pause for some of our sort of veterans that have watched new people from your boards be assigned or asked to join this. Does that sort of hit the mark of sort of what you would hope a new council member, a new board member would sort of expect when they find out they're either being voluntold or being part of this? Does that sort of hit the mark when Martha just sort of narrated?
Well, an assumption for someone that is new, would be newly elected, I would assume that they've got enough background to have the overview of where their county fits in the bigger region, the SMSA, and would be at least acquainted with the TPO, CVTA, and maybe PlanRVA, but
I wouldn't make that
sometimes my assumptions are not always on point.
I would not make that assumption.
I wouldn't either.
Go ahead, Andre.
I was just agreeing, I wouldn't either, because from my experience, one of the challenges that I faced was there's so much information and projects that are submitted through this body that are prioritized and then voted on as a block. For me to be informed about what my city submitted before I took office would be really hard. And to know kind of what's the process of that, meaning, are we just giving it a blessing? What's next on action for that locality? It's important to kind of know that this is a body that moves in glacial pace of years, right? It's not just what we decide today happens tomorrow. And so in that, what we get realizing is that it's hard to understand as a new person coming in, that is just part of the step of what this job is.
Yep.
And there is a pre-work expectation coming into this room for these meetings to what is not only your jurisdiction's aspects, but what the funding sources can be. Now that we have CVTA especially, it creates, I think, a lot of complication that is new. And while some of us are veterans, and I'm not associating myself as one directly, but I do think with all the retired leaders we had that we said goodbye to last month, I am now maybe associated as one. And so with that, it is not easy, and it has taken me a good first term to really get what this body can and does do. So I would say it is important to do that.
And I can tell you that when you first get elected, I call it waterboarding of information. You're in such information overload that for at least 6 months to a year, you're trying to figure out who you are and who all the people you're supposed to be talking to are. And honestly, coming to this meeting is just going, okay, who are these people? They don't even care what you're doing here. They're like, who are these people and why am I supposed to know them? I mean, it takes, at least to your point, it probably takes a full term to even really get to truly understand what your position is. No matter how much you think you researched before you ran, you have no idea what you didn't know until you get on into the position.
So that's sort of spinning all the way back to, so why is the orientation sort of done by a committee, and why are some of the committee members colleagues? It's because there's, I think, both a shared responsibility for staff to sort of help be a resource to understand it, but then also as colleagues, it's our job to sort of ramp up people a little bit quicker. So that's sort of why this, I think, is sort of been assigned to this committee. You know, it's sort of both a staff and a volunteer effort to try to get people on board as fast as possible. So I agree with what both have said. I mean, it's sort of a tough thing to do. I think the, you know, way Mr. Davis taught about it is, you know, you're sort of wearing a jersey and you're playing against everybody sort of one day, and then you go and represent the NFL the next day, you know, and you're sort of representing the league. It's a whole
You're
different.
playing on your team and then now you're in the Pro Bowl.
It's,
And you're working with players from other teams in the Pro Bowl.
So thanks for letting me pause, because I know that's been something that was sort of the genesis of sort of our internal communication a couple months ago. So why don't you keep going with
So, yeah, so
what we're planning on?
I think one question I have for the committee is, in the day, you know, February 8th is the day that we're planning to conduct our orientation. The idea is that it's in conjunction with scheduled adjacent to the regular meeting time, so that people who maybe aren't identifying as new members, but who want to stay in the orientation feel like it's okay to stay. And I think there's two opportunities there. One, to maybe pick up a little nugget of something that you hadn't thought about before, but also I'm trying to think of ways through this format that we can create an opportunity to not just have me presenting a long slide deck, but to have actual members of the commission talking to one another about what it is to be on the commission and to be a member jurisdiction of this regional body. And so my question is, how do you think we could structure that? I mean, I have like a slide deck that's kind of, you know, we're gonna work through like the who we are and what we do, and try to take the recommendations that you all have given over the last 2 meetings discussing this about how to, I think, enrich it with content that's a little bit more geared toward what's in it for me and those types of things, give more real examples of value add, so to speak, that we've given in the jurisdictions, projects that have been able to move forward locally, that kind of thing. But is there an opportunity to have some of you, I'd say more than chime in, but play a more formal role in the delivery of the content?
I think we need to, that's what we started talking about last month, is, yeah, I mean, the perspective that a member brings is slightly different. And if
Yeah.
we can go through the deck and maybe start thinking about, you know, sort of where somebody either has an interest or plugging in, or a perspective of plugging in, and I sort of recognize I'm not appointed or elected, I'm our citizen representative to this, so I don't have to go through the same onboarding, obviously, that we've been talking about here, but I also have a ton of respect for all the people that have to do both get through the process of getting elected and then figuring this out. So I would prefer those people who chime in to be more elected officials who have sort of taken on that dual role. I think it means more. So,
And the one thing I might add, I completely agree, and there may be an opportunity to structure that time on the 8th, so there's a little bit of presenting. Maybe somebody weighs in who has some perspective and is kind of, you know, we seed the crowd with a question or input. And then ask the other members more broadly, like, well, are there other examples we should include of where your jurisdiction has been helped by the resources available through here? Or are there other, so it becomes participatory of the group. Somebody may come up with something that none of us would have thought of to include as a important reason why this is so helpful as an organization, or an important resource to tap into, or whatever. But it could be a little bit of pre-planned contribution, and a little bit of who else would like to add something, and try to draw people in.
I think an interesting topic around that exact kind of example would be, you know, when I first came on in 2017, 2018, there's a lot of conversation around the Port of Richmond and looking at some improvements to access for that. And we did some studies with General Assembly, Commerce Road study, and some other things that came through with that work. But the challenge we have is that as a city, if you were to ask me what my top 3 projects were gonna be as a city to focus on and to push forward, that's not it. But as a region, it is paramount that we focus on the access to the port, because it helps Chesterfield, it helps Eastern Henrico, and it elevates the opportunity for the region to grow. But if you ask the jurisdiction where it resides, where that falls in our priority list, it's not gonna make that top 3 list. Now, therein lies, I think, a top opportunity to explore, well, how can it? And that's the question I think this body can have. We can't have that in City Hall because we're gonna go, we've got so many things to deal with. Our list is 25 projects long and we're fighting to get these 3 ready. And so the reason why I think that's important is we're making decisions that are impacting the region. Fall Line Trail coming up with BRT North-South. We've got a lot of these regional projects, and while that is in the city jurisdiction, it is a regional asset. And if we don't think about projects in that capacity, it's hard to expect me to prioritize fixing that by submitting projects to this, TPO and through CPTA to be prioritized in that capacity. And therein lies an interesting debate of what do we focus on? And the meeting we had last month, we talked about education and workforce and how important the things that we are investing in creates access to school and jobs and other quality of life benefits. It makes this body more important than just building roads, than funding projects for widening a road to make sure it meets capacity. It's way bigger than that, and until we elevate some of these topics, I do think we just come with our own cards to play at each meeting as a city every year and play them as we're supposed to because that's what we have available. I think there's some opportunity for this to also, as an example, look at more opportunities like that. Does that make sense?
It does, and I think that's, in my mind, that's exactly the kind of, here's a perspective that I had with a specific thing as I was trying to get my mind around what this organization does versus what I do at home, kind of thing, right? And that, to me, it would be like, sign Andreas up for that story as part of it.
Right.
And as I listen to you speak, then, to me, there's gotta be some sort of bookends where at some point, what this organization does is complementary to everything that you talked about, but then there's at some point where there's a guardrail that says, guess what, this organization doesn't do that.
Right.
Because I think we have been guilty of being let out and sort of asked to chime in on everything. And what I love about the strategic plan is if there's a role for us to chime in on something that's not as our part of our core service or function, our role as convener is a really cool way to do that. Sort of why we built the space, why we sort of created it. So convening people, subject matter experts in other subjects is a good place where we can sort of draw the line. We're happy to convene those meetings, but we just don't have any expertise in that particular.
And I think that's a good point. I think convening, like we're convening the meeting tomorrow, it's not a PlanRVA meeting per se, but to the point that everybody's making, we're talking about something that every jurisdiction is affected by, that we all need to work together on, because if we keep doing it independently, we're not gonna get anywhere. But if we start doing it collectively, then we're much more likely to be heard. And we need to, that's not PlanRVA's belly
Core, right.
It is just not, but it is, the people in this room are the people that are most likely to be able to work together to achieve things that are greater for each jurisdiction than they otherwise could. And there lies in how you tie the two together. The core is, this is what we do, but this is how we can all help each other as a region so that we can do this better. And I think that's what we're doing tomorrow.
I think it's a great example, absolutely.
I think the last few minutes of the conversation have really illustrated the value of you all chiming in, because all of what you've talked about over the last maybe like 5 or 7 minutes are not things that I can put in a slide deck.
Right.
And it's the inherent relationship building that you have as an opportunity that as leaders from across the region, you're coming to a place and a space on a monthly basis to handle the business of this organization, but you get the benefit of the network that you're building and the relationships that you're building to be able to do those other things that happen potentially outside the walls of this organization or with the staff.
Well, I know tomorrow, six of the 9 jurisdictions have RSVP to
Right.
be at that. And again, it's not necessarily a PlanRVA function, but it was what brought us all together. PlanRVA is what brought us together to be able to make that happen. And having 6 out of the 9 already RSVP'd shows how important the conversations that we can have here
Right.
really do affect everything that all of our jurisdictions do, and what this organization ultimately is capable of. Even if it's not the core, it still can host that, because we can't, I guarantee you host it just at city council, or you host it in Henrico, or you host it in Ashland. like, everybody's not gonna show up. But you have it in a place that people are all familiar with coming to, and you have some pretty good representation coming. We can do a lot more together, and I just don't think that we've done that in the past. Not that the organization hasn't functioned well, because it's done what it's supposed to do. But there's a lot more that it can open up doors to, which will make this organization function better as well, if that makes sense. Because as we get better, as we work together, we're gonna be more in tune to the Port of Richmond or something else that's coming in that we wouldn't otherwise say, this really benefits my jurisdiction. We can actually see how it does benefit the jurisdiction. If nothing else, it benefits it in the relationship building, that we can all work together to go to the state and to lobby the state together to have more pull to get the things that we need as a region.
Yep, it's awesome.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir, Mr. Waddell?
thinking on outreach, many jurisdictions hold new member orientation for their newly electeds, and ones that I've been to include the veterans as well as the newer folks. Might we have a representative there to show this rollout, or possibly train the trainer, somebody on, let's say, county staff at Hanover, for instance, familiarize them with what this is and have them make a presentation? Because I think a number of the veterans know about this. The new folks may not know about PlanRVA and the TPO and CVTA, but to remind the veterans, in addition, with this rollout might be beneficial. And another bigger comment, kind of dovetailing with the prior speaker, is we are getting to Pro Bowl with what we're doing and their interactions and the collaboration. And tomorrow's seminar is an excellent example of that. I'm proud of where we've come from and where we're going. We're almost Pro Bowl.
Do you want to get through the slides for sort of reaction?
Well, I have two thoughts. One, to be clear, and I want to make sure that we communicate this effectively for February 8th, all commissioners are invited, and I would say encouraged to remain in the room after the close of the official business meeting and moving into the orientation. I think, Mr. Weddell, just to be able to reinforce that the voice of the veterans in the room is going to be helpful in the conversation. The other thing I wanted to just say is that Janice has had one meeting so far convening the board support personnel, I'll call them. They're clerks. They go by different names in different jurisdictions, but we did kind of a hybrid meeting earlier this fall just to be able to build some better relationships across the region with the people that support your local elected boards. And many of them asked Janice as a follow-up if they could take our little kind of intro to PlanRVA slide deck back with them. I think you forwarded it out to them afterwards. And several of them said that they would be using that in their 2x2s that they were doing with onboarding new elected officials. So I think that part of what you asked about, Mr. Weddell, actually has already happened just by virtue of that connection that Janice has made. And I think that'll continue to probably get a little bit better and stronger every year. Because of course, we're really only dealing with the people that get appointed to us, not beforehand when all of the conversations are happening about who's gonna come and that kind of thing. I was thinking, in the interest of time and trying to be respectful of everyone, I have a slide deck, but I was wondering if maybe I could send it out to everyone with some pointed sections of where I really feel like I need some help to be able to build that kind of color into the conversation. So I'm just looking at the time and seeing where we are. So if
Yeah, because this is the value of what we're trying to do, is if we can figure out a way to pull this event off with the spirit of what we're talking about right here, then that's our objective. So you're right.
So if I could do that and be like pretty specific with, this is what I think this might need, or who could help me here, that could be, would that be is that too taxing of everyone's time?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think so, especially if you're highlighting like we'd love a story here, I'm not sure I've got this transition right,
Yeah,
if we can direct our attention,
Yes.
that makes it sort of less onerous to try to
yeah, so that
review
you
and
don't,
figure out how
like,
to
really
help.
like, take a look at this slide and tell me, yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
The other thing I did want to talk through with you all is that I do have in my ideal flow, I'd like to invite Saren Adakari from our staff to come and present. Those of you that were with us, I think it was in November of 2022, when we met at the airport. He presented on the opioid, the administration of the opioid education program to be able to train people how to use the shot, the Narcan, thank you. And the response was really strong for that. He talked a little bit about our data dashboard and that kind of thing. I was thinking that it might be kind of neat to have him come and do an overview of the region's demographics and socioeconomic information and how that's changed over time. So, and be able to give a little bit of an illustration of some of our data capacity and particularly, I think with that idea, and this is my question to you all, I think most people who come to the commission have a pretty good handle on what their community looks like and what's going on in their district and in their county, but they may not have really a sense of how that fits into the 9 jurisdiction region. And so I was thinking that if we could do a bit of a deep dive during the February 8th orientation about just like what is the composition of the region demographically and some of the other regional indicators and things that we track, that could be a helpful bit of information for people to walk away with.
Yeah, I can't think of anywhere else they would really get that high level perspective on.
And Sugar, I really like that idea. I think for both new people and current people, kind of getting the opportunity to be reminded of sort of what is the latest data that we have, and it both highlights sort of what this organization brings as well as important stuff. My question would be whether there's a link back to the SharePoint site. Like, is there could the presentation he deep dives on be kind of based around 7 data slides that we could all look at later that are on the SharePoint? And the reason for that is, one of the reasons that I'm thinking about that, when we ask all the commissioners to stay for orientation, I think it's an easier sell to say, we want to orient the new folks and show everybody this new resource about how we're all working together and where stuff is. And part of that is this data that we're including that he's going to talk about. You see where I'm going?
Yes, I am.
So make the
What's in it for
presentation
me?
very high.
Not that I was planning on
Maybe
walking out at that point,
All
but
that was, what's in it for me?
it's all, yeah. And that's always a really important lens to keep in mind.
That's such a great question to find a way to keep asking, is, sort of, why is this important to me? What's in it for me? It doesn't always sound, it sounds a little smart-assy when you say it that way, but
But it's human nature.
exactly.
Well, and to your
So-
earlier
so
point,
you're saying-
the key members of this audience are overwhelmed with stuff. And if we don't give them a context about, hey, you're gonna find this important, you may not understand why yet, but here's where this is gonna play for you over the course of your term, that's what we're trying to bring them into.
So I think I will talk to him about this, but I think one possibility would be that kind of, if I hear where you're going, we've got this like set of high level slides, and that would be where people, the SharePoint site would be where people would walk out of this room and be able to go back and find that at any time they wanted. I also think that it's possible that he could create some click-throughs so that if somebody wanted to take what they heard in this, 10 slide deck and see what that meant actually in their locality, we could build that. So it does create that kind of more like what's in it for me, I heard this presentation and I heard this stat, but I want to know what it means in Ashland, and so how do I look at that relative to either the rest of the region or the state or, whatever.
Yep.
I think, I don't know how much of that we can do by February 8th, but I think
Right.
that's sort of the thread that we could, the spirit that we could approach that with, so that I think what I'm also hearing is that that's an opportunity to make sure that the SharePoint gets introduced and demoed, but then there's a reason why people would want to go immediately back to it and look around.
Because you didn't get all the information at the meeting.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I think there's just 2 little added on things that are considered as we progress and move in maturing this model is the interpresentation in, I don't know which committee it was, either PlanRVA or TPO, and it was back, I think, 2018. It was May 6th consulting from Philadelphia, and they presented about their housing plan.
Yeah.
And it was amazing, but I can't find it.
Oh,
And so there are resources that I
Yeah.
think we have had in these conversations that go beyond just a typical thing, that are amazingly insightful and helpful. But then it's like, you know, whenever I talk with like John Fatulkas and Joe Casey about things, they're like, well, the city can do it, but it'd be better if it was a regional capacity. And I'm like, well, starting the regional capacity for a housing initiative is imperative, but I can't create that. We need to create that. How does that we thing come out of a conversation, which I think is very valuable? Because I think that's something that could be interesting too, is how we connect some of the dots, because housing, transit, roads, buses, all these things, new investment of another Lego comes in. How do we make sure we're doing this together across the entire region on the same initiative of equality or equity is important.
For Lego, for instance. It's important for every business that comes in to know how they're gonna get their employees. And every jurisdiction wants a Lego, right? But the Lego in any of the jurisdictions helps all the surrounding jurisdictions, but you don't intuitively understand that. You have to understand, okay, so how do we get the employees there so that we can get the business?
Sure.
Regardless of where you're at, and how do you get people from the other jurisdictions there? And I think some of the things that are going on with GRTC, with the rides that you can get more on demand, more to a Uber type thing is one way. And I think working as a regional board, trying to figure out how to incentivize businesses in high work clusters to be a part of the link for transportation so that they work together and make that last mile that GRTC can't make, that those businesses together can make, so that people from this jurisdiction can get to that jurisdiction and get to work. And I don't think it all has to be solved by the government. I think it needs to be regional collaboration with the businesses that need the employees as well. So, I mean, but that's one way you tie all that together is Lego and Chesterfield good for the city of Richmond? Not if their people can't get there. But if their people can get there and get a job there, that's a good thing for the city of Richmond, and vice versa.
Rising tide, right?
One question on the data is just for our jurisdictions, right?
The 9, yeah.
Okay. And sometimes data people will color outside the lines, and I sort of notice that people sort of lose focus a little bit when somebody uses regional data that maybe is broader than our constituents, so I would suggest it just be for our.
Okay, yeah, I will pass that on and make sure that we'll try to anticipate if there are questions and we can't get the data for the 9, but most of the data that he's working with, that the team's working with, are for the 9 only, so.
The last thing I was gonna say is, can we add some of these things into our inner city visit we do? Like as we go learn from other cities, kind of how they do certain things too, because.
Yeah, so one thing I will say on that, as you all know, the day after our orientation, the chamber's hosting the first intra-city visit, I think it's an action summit is how they've called it. There's been a much larger invitation to us and some other regional partners to help shape the curriculum for that and the visits to Atlanta. I did a call with Atlanta's Regional Commission and the staff at the chamber to kind of talk through the similarities and the differences, but I think that there's more and more that could happen with that, and it might be something kind of in the spirit of how this committee has evolved over the last several months. That might be something that we could think about how to more formally give not just a staff perspective to PlanRVA, but this board's perspective about what we want to get out of. The other thing that I'm really excited about is that we did distribute the notice of the upcoming inner-city visit to Atlanta this spring to all of the 9 CAOs and administrators. And I let them know that we did budget this year for our smaller jurisdictions to send someone. We would help offset the cost. And 3 of our smaller jurisdictions have said that they want to take advantage of that this year.
Great.
So I know,
So
like,
scholarship
for somebody that's been around for a long time, and we've talked about this, I'm really excited that you're gonna have more of your regional colleagues on that trip than have been able to attend in the past, so there might be more ways that we can help shape the agenda and the topics and how those conversations unfold so that they really do fit the interests of the attendees.
I like that.
What else do you need committee input on?
I think we have some homework to do on our end to get the SharePoint site at a place to be able to share out, and then similarly with the slide deck and, you know, some really kind of pointed questions so that we're efficient with your all's time. But this has been helpful for me.
Ms. Pearson, anything you want to ask about or chime in on? Final words?
No, I'm just taking it all in.
Thank you for joining us.
I think the
Yes.
other thing I would just ask, because we brought this up at the last meeting too, many of you didn't have the benefit of getting to go through an orientation for a couple of different reasons. And so I think your feedback, just kind of honest feedback to me, if you have time to shoot an email over that just says, I wish I would have known X, or I still don't know Y, would be really helpful for me, because I think one of the hardest parts about putting together this material is I live this every day. So it's hard sometimes for us as staff to think outside of that and to put ourselves in your shoes. I'm sorry that that's the way that it is for us, but it is difficult to imagine we think all of the information that we're sharing with you is incredibly interesting and important. So your perspective on that would be really helpful, because I think I have a feeling that there are many times where we don't quite hit the mark on what's the right point on that particular item.
Right. We'll have a brand new planning commission member that's coming in, so that will probably be in February.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, so I mean, if you have insight from your time with us, you know, things
Sure.
that you think that person will benefit from as they're getting oriented, I would really love to hear that.
Okay.
Especially since everyone from New Kent is going to be new to us this time.
Charlie, any final comments?
Following up on Martha's data, as a retired data processor, my philosophy on data and information: if some's good, more is better. Too much is just right.
Okay. We'll put that too much on the SharePoint site. How about that?
Let's do that. Tagline. Like it.
Brent?
I like that.
Brent, any final comments, questions?
No, I like the evolution of this. I think the more perspectives is helping refine it more and more. And I think we are really lining it into something that is not only going to be good for this crop of folks to kind of get oriented more quickly, but also have this ongoing resource through the SharePoint that'll, you know, somebody who's maybe comes out of the 8th understanding a little bit more about what they can get. 2 months later, when they want to go get it, now they also know where it is. And I think that's a really big deal. So I feel good about where we're headed.
Mr. Engel, any other comments?
I just appreciate being able to sit in and participate, even though, like I said, it was on my calendar and I was like, I don't know why it's on my calendar, but I'm good.
Did you have a very helpful
glad you're here.
perspective?
Yeah, thank you
Andreas, anything else?
for that.
Yeah, this has been great. I look forward to continuing this. It'll be a fun.
We've essentially recruited you guys for the 8th
Yeah.
as well. That's what we've
Yeah.
essentially done, so.
Was that why you showed up? Because it was on your calendar?
Nope. I'm not gonna invite, that's optional for everybody, and I was like, well, those who think they should be here are gonna show up, so it's a good crew to show up to.
This is a tactic maybe we need to learn.
Yeah, I was gonna
There you go. File that one away, Mark.
All right, thank you all for your time.
Thank you all.
Comment.
Appreciate it.
Good stuff.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah, so I just want to go over some more.